know, it is Saturday, June 14th, and obviously we will be participating and attending the 250th celebration of the Army. I'm curious, Sal Greco and our CIA operative is joining us. Mr. Operative, what are your thoughts about the parades and the military festivities that are going on in Washington, D.C. today and the protests? Sal, what are your thoughts on what's going on in D.C. today?
Well, it's a good day, Flag Day, actually, I believe it's called. It's a holiday. And also, I think the president is making it, pushing the issue also that it's also his birthday. It's a good thing to celebrate, but unfortunately, right now, this country is being, I say, best way to describe it is being held hostage by some entitled children and misfits of society with these riots. It's all political theater because there's no meaning behind this. A few years ago, it was over an incident that occurred in Minnesota, which led to widespread unrest in certain cities. So, every couple of years, just going to pick a new topic to use and use it as political theater. And instead of using police, and if you need help, the National Guard, they're going to stand there and grandstand and think that that's going to solve all the issues. That's your local politicians, not your president.
Mr. Operative,
I got you now.
Are we contributing to the deficit by spending $43 million this weekend on the military parade? Is it worth the investment, considering what not only the Army, but all branches of government and law enforcement sacrifice for our freedom and our safety every day around the world?
I think it's well worth the expense and the money to spend on this. We've been actually at a sprint pace since 2001 after 9/11, and we have sent hundreds of thousands of people around the world to do things that have been very challenging and difficult in Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, and a myriad of other countries, and never held anything that would thank or honor the military for their tremendous contribution. I think the 250th birthday is a perfect date to do that. The weather's supposed to be really good. I think there's going to be the largest re-enlistment exercise held at the main center of the main system for the observation. They're going to re-enlist in the Army, take the oath, and it's an enormous number of people, and they're going to do it with the SecDef and the president standing there. So it's a symbolic thing, but it's good for the American people to see they get a lot for their money, much more so much more bang for their buck than they would get on a lot of other federal programs.
Here's what's fascinating and interesting is how every single time there's a riot that relates to some sort of outrageous activism, there's always one thing that ends up happening in the process, Sal and Mr. Operative. Small and large businesses alike get looted. Why is that? Why are people who are allegedly just protesting in support of good causes looting and stealing from others? Do conservative protesters loot and rob stores when they protest? Because that's exactly what's happening in LA right now. And the fact that the mayor, Karen Bass, has had this curfew in place is an acknowledgement of what the president is trying to do to protect the communities of this country. In an apparent protest of the ICE raids on LA businesses, now in San Francisco. We're going to get to what happened in New York City. Sal is more than ready to talk about that. In their attempt to shield the businesses who have given employment to these illegals, they're looting businesses. Does it make any sense? No, it doesn't. These riots, and I'm going to say it plain and simple, are opportunism for thieves. Nobody knows what they're protesting for. It's not based on no principle. Because you know what they want? These thieves, these thugs, want free stuff. That's what they want, free stuff. That seems to be what it all comes down to every single time, Sal. These riots about free stuff.
I not only agree with you, Armstrong, I was out there myself a few years ago when this was going on. It was the theme of the riot was we're either going to try to lure police into confrontation, which is potential lawsuits, or we're just going to go straight into the businesses. And I've seen some of this footage, especially in LA. I mean, they're throwing pieces of cement. They have, I guess, the bricks laying around once again. We don't know how that happened. I mean, somebody's funding this. How they operate. You know, it's not like they just woke up and did this. I mean, they are organized. And then I saw rioters with weapons, guns, shooting. There's a video of that also. And there's one common denominator also. They're wearing a mask. So they're hiding their identity. And they're also all dressed in either all black. They're wearing a keffiyeh, almost like a uniform, an outfit. So, again, every single one of these times it was a protest. I, as a police officer, always said, look, you could peacefully protest. That was kind of what the country was built on. But unfortunately, now in 2025 and the years prior, in the last couple of years, I'd say, there's always going to be someone in the background looking to hijack this and use it for what you just said.
Free
and
stuff.
It's unfortunate. They want to destroy businesses and loot and get free stuff.
One of the reasons why I specifically asked Sal, Mr. Operative, to join us today, because of something you just said. Somebody is organizing this. Somebody is paying for this. Somebody in some dark place is benefited from this. Mr. Operative has been out investigating and doing research, and what he has discovered will not shock you. That is that Iran, Cuba, and Venezuela are behind this destruction all across America. Mr. Operative, go into more detail.
Armstrong, over the last 5 years, especially, we've had a flood of people come across the border, and the very disturbing number is there is a count, because ICE processes a lot of them, and the fighting age males outnumber when people are fleeing conflict, poverty, disease, or just war. The whole family shows up. They bring wives, kids, and everything they can carry, but the preponderance of what's happened is fighting age males. And now you've got guys who are, a lot of them aren't Americans. They're not illegal immigrants. They're operations people that are militarily trained or paramilitarily trained, and they're deployed. There's people, as Sal said, they're wearing keffiyehs. A lot of them are wearing Hamas headbands. They have a supply of things that cost money. People are paid. They don't have to pay for their hotels. They're funded while they're there. There's a payroll person that's mixed in there that distributes money in different sectors. This is a well-organized subversion program, and there's 3 phases to these kinds of things generally, the way it's taught by intelligence services. It's simple, subtle, and direct sabotage. We're in the 3rd phase. There's a direct confrontation now. They're seeking contact with the police and security forces. Looting is a great property damage instrument because it draws the police away to protect property. And LAPD has been short of manpower for a long time. The Marines are going to augment some of that, take the load off for physical security of federal buildings. But the U.S. government and the system overall is outnumbered by the oppositions, because millions of people have come into the United States, and a lot of them are trained to do exactly this, and they're paid well. They have legal representation. They can get attorneys if they get arrested. All of that it's a tale that needs to be examined and looked at by the intelligence services. The FBI and the police department in LA has a very good intel unit. I'm sure they have a pretty clear picture by now of what is actually going on and who's paying for it. We are under siege. The lesson takeaway from 9/11 to now, and our disastrous departure from Afghanistan and the loss of Iraq, is the United States can be beaten, but they can't be beaten if you're fighting the teeth of the U.S. military. You've got to stay out of the teeth of the United States blunt instrument and take America on inside America, and that's what you're seeing now.
You know,
this is just getting underway.
Sal, when you listen to Mr. Operative, I mean, just in New York City, no one is really highlighting this. I saw the video. There are 7 or 8 cop cars burned in New York City during the riots over the last 48 hours.
That's right, Armstrong. In the 83rd precinct, they're looking for two males dressed in all black. And the main thing, again, once again, is they covered their face. And they went inside the 83rd precinct, which is that parking lot, and they put 8 cars ablaze. Now, I'm going to tell you, you know, all the full details aren't out there, but I guarantee you that the 83rd precinct didn't have the personnel to stop this, because why? All their personnel is out in Manhattan and other areas of Brooklyn because they're rioting all over the place. So if you actually think about it, Armstrong, it's actually not a bad idea for these protesters and rioters saying, we're going to divide and conquer. While they're fighting people on one side, we're going to go right to where they are. And who do they have left? How many cops are really in that building protecting it when everybody is already sent out to go to another location that needs as many, you know, all hands on deck? And now you leave your own facility, you know, virtually defenseless. So you might see this happen again and again, because now they've found the weaknesses. Mr. Operative is right. And they've been watching and waiting for a long time. And for the last 4 years prior to President Trump, we were being invaded. And there was a migrant crisis all over this country. That didn't just go away, Armstrong. And that's part of the problem, is they're using that as an excuse, because all this president's trying to do is to correct course and fix that. But again, they're well organized. You have other people funding things, and they're going to take this opportunity now to try and destroy the country from within. It's really a shame, but I think, you know, the president and his administration has other plans on how to combat this. And hopefully sending the military and the Marines into L.A. and having the National Guard on standby and having them around will quell this once and for all.
And one thing about what you're saying about the president and immigration, this is why his numbers are soaring, not according to conservative outlets, but CNN, among Hispanics. They respect and applaud what he's doing in Los Angeles, California, something that the legacy media will not tell you. I'm Armstrong Williams. We'll be back. You know, Sal, Home Depot parking lots has become a favorite location for ICE, as well as construction sites. You know, how much of the deportation, the tracking down illegals, is really going to severely impact businesses across America?
I actually hear from people all the time, Armstrong. They're hurting as far as their businesses basically being raided. This is a heavy-handed approach. It's not that it's not illegal, but it's a heavy-handed approach. And, you know, I see them also going to courthouses. It's a heavy-handed approach. I mean, I thought we were going after the gangbangers and, you know, the people hanging out on corners, these Trendiragua people. Now you're going into people working in farms. You're going after people working in pizzerias. And I can tell you...
You said it, but why? When did this snowball into something else we did not see coming?
Well, his campaign promise was that he was going to try to, you know, get rid of as many of them as possible.
And how are you describing them?
Well, so he was basically, the campaign promise was that anyone that was entered this country illegally, he was going to have them try to either take them out of this country or have them leave and try to come back the right way, is the way they phrased it. But again, it's a heavy-handed approach when you're showing up to businesses, because you're now affecting the American citizen. We know that a lot of these people, especially these jobs, these are jobs that, you know, the average American doesn't apply for or want. I mean, that's why the job market is the way it is. And these people come here, whether they're here illegal or not, and they just fit the bill. They work, and then you go to, listen, people go to the department stores, you go to shopping centers, you go to the pizzerias, you go to construction sites where you see homes being built. Who do you think's doing those jobs? The laborers. Those people may not be citizens of this country. So, but that doesn't mean they shouldn't also, maybe they applied for visas. We don't know, because that's another thing they're doing. Because if they showed up to the courthouse, those are people that have applied for visas. Now, the other problem, of course, Armstrong, I've mentioned this for a long time. You don't have enough immigration judges to oversee this, and we don't have the personnel as a country to deport everyone. It would take billions of dollars. No one's ever tried to attempt to even present this to legislators. So again, it's a heavy-handed approach, and I'm sure plenty of businesses are complaining about this. And I understand where the administration is coming from, but this is a very sensitive and tough thing to do. But I don't know why there's such a heavy-handed approach, when maybe a different approach might work, where you're not so heavy-handed, but you are targeting the gang members that we previously mentioned here.
So Leonard, which brings me to the real point of my probing Sal. There are many people, and people like to label them as Democrats and lefties, who don't want everybody who's illegal deported from this country. That's the bottom line here. And my question is, should everybody who's illegal, because I have friends of mine who've had nannies and housekeepers for 37, 40 years, and they're scared to death, and they're illegal. How far do we go with this?
You know, Armstrong, if you take a look at polling data, a lot of the most important issues in the United States hover around 20%. Some top out at 30%. 56%, according to a CNN poll, want illegal immigrants out of the country. Now, I'm not saying for, I'm not saying against. I'm simply saying that the overwhelming majority of the American public.
But do they understand the question? Is the question asked appropriately? I don't really believe that question is being really asked in the right way. I don't think people really understand what illegal means. I don't think they understand that. So do you think it's fair that you should just judge that basically because 56% of the American people said get them all out of here? Because when they think of illegals, I think Sal makes a very good point. They think of gangbangers, drug dealers,
trafficking.
Yeah, they're not thinking about everyday people working on farms, working at Home Depot, working on construction sites. We gotta differentiate here. It's not the same thing.
It's a political. Look, gentlemen, it's a political question, and it depends upon the optics. It depends upon the politics in terms of what you have, what you think. I mean, there are 650,000, according to ICE in 2024, people in the United States who have criminal backgrounds. We have 12 to 16 million illegal immigrants in the United States. We have 13,000 immigrants convicted of homicide, not in custody. I mean, there's a lot of bad actors out there. You can't have 12 to 16 million people crossing the border illegally, and we have no idea who they are.
So you're saying, well, let me stop you, because I want to make sure I have a clear understanding of the two people I have a lot of respect for. So you're saying everybody who's illegal in America should be sent back and can come back the right way. That's what you're saying.
If you're asking for my personal opinion is that there needs to be some sort of examination of how long they've been here, their criminal history. I'm not sure that
But most of these people are not criminals, Leonard.
That's correct.
That's the issue. They're not. In fact, they can contribute to the society and do jobs that nobody else wants to do. They're not criminals. I agree, get the criminals out of here, but come on. We talk about common sense. Is there a role for common sense in here?
don't disagree. I don't disagree with the fact that there's a ton of immigrants, illegal or otherwise, working construction jobs, doing jobs that the average American does not want to do. And if it was up to me personally, I would figure out a way, a middle ground, and not deport every person. But, you know, we would have to have an administrative structure in this country 4 to 5 times the current administrative structure. Sal mentioned immigration judges. We'd have to quadruple the amount of immigration judges. There is a certain point where the problem has gotten so big, 12 to 16 illegal crossings, 12 to 16 million illegal crossings. The problem is now out of hand. And it would take an enormous amount of infrastructure, an enormous tax-paid process to find that middle ground as to who should stay and who should go.
Well, listen, you're dealing with some of the most sophisticated and intelligent people on the planet. Listen, Sal, I saw a Minnesota legislature get up in the assembly and announce, I am an illegal immigrant. Should Trump send ICE in to arrest her and deport her back to her homeland?
No.
No, absolutely not.
No, and that's the thing.
That's the issue.
This issue has been kicked down the road for many decades from Congress. That is the problem.
Yes.
And no one wants to address it because there has to be, I hate to say this because Republicans are concerned, don't want to hear this, but it's the truth. There has to be some kind of amnesty deal that is given to those that are in this country and have been working those jobs that we just mentioned, the housekeeper, the laborer, the guy in the pizzeria, the one in the department store. There has to be some pathway to citizenship for someone who's been there for years, hasn't been in trouble, and they deserve the right to try to be an American citizen since they've been here, even though it's illegal, they've been here, and they haven't done anything wrong.
And it should be expeditious.
Correct. That is the issue.
Look,
we can't just arrest people.
No, look, I have to say this, okay? You know, I know people think I'm a hardliner and I'm a heartless. I am when it comes to these criminals. They kill people like Rachel Morin, who throw bricks and other things at law enforcement officers, who kill people and shoot people for no reason at all. But everyday people who only brings progress to America, and they just want a better life for themselves, and they found that for themselves and their children. I don't want those people harmed. I mean, come on. Listen, there's got to be a better process of doing this because you're not going to deport 16 million people out of America and, in the process, Sal, destroy the economy at the same time because who's going to do these jobs, okay? In these restaurants, who's going to do it? At these airports. You cannot imagine people who are illegal in this country. You'd be shocked.
Look, you've got decades, as Sal just said, you have decades of this in Congress and the inaction in Congress that nobody wanted to take this on. At least Trump is taking it on. 44%, according to the U.S. District Court, of non-citizens have criminal histories. 44%. That's 44% of the possibility of 16 million illegal immigrants. That's millions of immigrants illegal immigrants in this country who have criminal backgrounds. Now, how you separate the good immigrants from the bad immigrants, that's just would be an unbelievably complex process. You would have to do a transportation safety network all over again. You would have to reinvent the wheel to set up a structure to figure out who's the good person and who's the bad person.
You know, it's what's interesting, though, Sal, and you know this better than most as a law enforcement official, and you're an intelligence officer. There are those who are in this country, this is why they wear their mask. They're doing the work of these Venezuelans, these Iranians, the Russians, the Chinese. We just had another situation where someone was trying to send another agro-terrorism fungicide to the University of Michigan. They were just arrested last night. I mean, listen, you don't want to feed into the enemy. This is just what they want. They want this chaos. And they go in and, like you said, while you out trying to protect the businesses, they're burning up police precincts, the cars. There's got to be a balance. And then you got all these ICE protests all across the country. But what is the better way? What is the path forward from your experience, Sal?
Well, such a heavy-handed approach may not be the best one, only because, technically speaking, these are local issues. They spring up locally. So you would expect, though, your mayor and your city council and that whole apparatus to get that right, which they don't. Why? Because they put in these laws that handcuff police officers, and it's a vicious circle that goes on and on and on. New York City, LA, Chicago, Atlanta, they all have the same kind of laws where they protect these rioters, or you would say the criminals. That's been a big issue when it comes to all of these things that occur with the riots. So even if you were to lock up one of these individuals, Armstrong, as you know, they're out in a couple hours. Seems to be a pattern. So even trying to say, let's lock them all up, that may not be the right action.
I think the action should be deport them immediately.
That would make sense.
Yes.
You've committed a felony. It would make sense. But then you have them go to ACLU, they get represented, and they give them all these you're in a constitutional crisis at the end, because you need to be convicted before you're deported. That's how, there's a process in this country. And then the problem is what? You don't have that immigration judge to hear this. You have to, I think it goes to a circuit judge. The circuit courts, Armstrong, they're full of, civil lawsuits, mine included. So how are you going to have an immigration hearing over some, a migrant gang member who just went out and burned down one of these buildings?
But I think the issue here is, unless we get this under control quickly, we have no idea how our nation is being undermined all across the country. We have no idea what is growing here. What is developing? It's a cancer, and you can feel it, and it's growing stronger and stronger. Because I'm telling you, our enemies are here, and they're exploiting this fracture in our country. And legislatures, politicians, elected officials, they must do something to quell this, to balance it out as soon as possible. Because let me tell you something, our democracy is at stake. And we'll be back.
It is easier to build up strong children than to try and repair broken men.
The streets are plagued with crime, violence, there's a lot of poverty, and it's all a result of lack of education that's happening in our schools. So it really is a crisis.
We come from very different political perspectives, but we've come to the same conclusion, and that is there is a crisis in the classroom. Children are being deprived of quality of life because they're being deprived of a good education. We must solve this problem. It's incumbent upon all of us to join hands together to get this done.
We can't afford to wait one more day before we address these issues, because every day we lose another child.
Let's stop the politicking. Let's stop the games. Let's really do something to give these kids a real chance at life and being a part of that American dream.
We need accountability for funding. Many of the districts where you're seeing very low test scores, students graduating with very low literacy and math comprehension rates, they are receiving a lot of funding. So where is the money going where our kids aren't being adequately educated?
If you believe every child is deserving of a quality education, please go to educationjusticefoundation.com. Aaron Evans is a seasoned political strategist and founder of president of Winning Republican Strategies. You listen to Sal, you listen to Leonard, you listen to our CIA operative. What are your thoughts?
Now, look, I think while we were, I mentioned, off screen that all three of you had phenomenal points. I mean, the reality is we're in such a mess right now with the immigration problem, and this goes back decades. I mean, it's a can that has continually been kicked down the road, but it was in the last, in the last 4 years. Really, we just saw compound in multiplying ways with the amount of illegal immigrants that came across the border and were here in the country. So I think that ultimately we've got limited time and limited resources. We've got a president who is willing to address it, and he's trying to address it. And and it's a messy situation. And I think that there's not going to be a perfect fix. I do think that it's for a long-term solution. And I think right now what the Trump administration is doing is focusing on getting the the bad actors out, and they are focusing on gang members and those who have known criminal records. That is who they're focusing on as they're going in. But ultimately, look, I agree. I think Congress needs to act, and it needs to be something where we actually have a. It's also unfair. I think historically we kind of look at it where from the perspective of the illegal immigrant perspective, and you're basically bouncing back and forth at the whim of a president and executive actions. Congress needs to actually lay out a framework and a direction of here's how we fix this problem long term, and look, and I think that we should enforce the laws and laws should be followed, but we've got to lay a real framework so that we can hit reset, get the bad actors out, and then figure out a path forward, and then maintain those laws and enforce them. I mean, at the end of the day, if we have laws on the books and we still open the fences and welcome people across and don't know who they are, where they came from, what immunizations they've had, no process whatsoever, like we saw in the last 4 years, it really doesn't matter what laws we have on the books by Congress. So, that is the catch-22.
Sal, before I go to Steve Laffey, have you ever, in all your years of law enforcement and you're dealing with intelligence and having law enforcement and intelligence officials across the United States, have you ever seen a time like this? It's very uneasy. Just something's just not right. That's going on. Are we more vulnerable? And when you think about all the millions of people that we allow to invade this country, they're out there somewhere, and then you got the Chinese trying to bring in this agro-terrorism right at our universities, at the University of Michigan. 2 were caught last week and another tried it again. Shipped them from the Wuhan lab in China directly to the university. They're brazen about it. And in the interview, they admitted they're a member of the Chinese Communist Party. I mean, it seems like we're vulnerable in so many areas now.
Yeah, Armstrong, I think the idea is to break the system from within. You have homegrown people that are involved also, and would rather see the entire country burn than see the country be successful. That would mean their own demise, but they just want to see the world burn, per se. I haven't seen anything like this. It's gotten progressively worse from when I started. I mean, I got on in the NYPD in 2008. From then till now, and usually we were quelling those problems, as far as like local crime issues. Under Ray Kelly as a police commissioner, those numbers were pretty low relative to what they are today. But now, when you combine all these things, now it seems that it's just, I don't know what you do anymore. Because whatever you throw, you just hope you throw something against the wall and it sticks. But that's not the right way forward either. And again, we're talking about how Congress, the last person to even attempt to tackle this whole migrant crisis that's been going on for decades was President Ronald Reagan. He caught a lot of flack for that, but he's the last president up until now to even try to come up with some sort of solution, because everyone else just keeps kicking the can down the road. And again, Congress is absent. They won't even, they talk a lot. I see them on, Fox News, all these other stations always, but where is their action? Why aren't there hearings? That's what people should be demanding, because they're the ones that set the law. That's what needs to happen. We need some kind of legislation moving forward, whether it's the pathway to citizenship. Are we going to deport all the criminals? What are we doing? Because it's just going to be executive action. You expect the president to do everything, but he's only limited to one branch of government. It's very unfortunate, I'm sure, but they have to stop kicking this can down the road, because the time has come that now we have to address this one way or the other.
Well, you know what's fascinating, Steve, is this. The crisis which the American people wanted President Trump to change was the invasion of the border. And Trump did that within the first 10 or 15 days of his administration. And then in a month, you barely had anybody trying to cross the border. Had he stopped there, and then if he said, if you commit a crime, you tag law enforcement officer, if you're a part of a gang, we're going to arrest you, we're going to take you through the legal process, and if found guilty, we're going to deport you out of here. I think 80% of the Americans would have been with that, they would have been okay. How did we get to where we are now? Steve.
Well, we get to where we are now by the people who are doing violence in our cities. That's how we got to where we are now in Los Angeles. I mean, Trump, everything you said and everything Sal said is exactly correct. And here we are today, and the comparison of what protest or what people did in the 60s versus today is light years different. I mean, Martin Luther King had specific agenda, and there was a hierarchy to get through the Voting Rights Act and the other acts of 65 and 68, the Fair Housing Act. And he declared success when he got those things, right? And he did it in a nonviolent way. Today, no hierarchy. We don't know who's responsible. They do it on the internet. You've got the young people between 18 and 29 who spend 30% of them are involved in this stuff on a regular basis, whether it's protesting on the internet, whatever it might be. So you have a whole younger generation who don't want to have any solutions. They look to Greta Thunberg, or whatever her name is, who's on a boat somewhere making news. That's what the world's about, making news. Not
lying that she was kidnapped. Please.
Well,
outrageous.
Whatever she's doing is not Martin Luther King, with a specific agenda, with meeting with the president over things that we could at the time, not everybody agreed with, right? John F. Kennedy didn't want to meet with Martin Luther King for a while, but with a specific agenda and declaring success over that. What we have now with the left-wing movement in our country is that the illegal immigrants are here, the violent ones are here, right? And President Trump's trying to deal with them, but it's very, very hard. And so he has to do the kind of things he's doing to root out some of these people, to get them out of the country because they're committing violence. And their whole thing is to bring down the country. That's the difference between yesterday. I mean, Martin Luther King appealed to American original ideals to get blacks and get away from Jim Crow laws, right? These people are appealing to the base instincts of the worst people to destroy America. It's much harder because we have a much more divided country.
You know, let me come back to you, Aaron. You know, it's interesting. Steve mentioned Greta. I think what was most shocking to me about the flotilla that she was on is that the Israeli police that confiscated the boat said she did not have enough supplies and food and aid on that flotilla to take care of people on the boat. But yet she had people believe that she was going to distribute all this aid to Gaza. It was a force from the beginning. Yeah. And yet young people buying into this. Yeah.
And the whole thing, I mean, it's all propaganda.
It's all propaganda.
And that's what we're seeing.
And she's laughing and giggling. I'm getting kidnapped. And these are serious matters. Yeah. She did not have enough supplies on the boat to take care of the people traveling with her. 10 or 11 people. Yeah. Wrap yourselves around that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think ultimately they knew exactly the whole goal was
play to the media.
Play to the media. Yeah. They didn't want to get to Gaza. They wanted to be intercepted so she could do a press release.
They never planned to get to Gaza.
They never planned to get to Gaza. So, and what hostage have you seen on the beach doing live selfies on Instagram? You know, where I mean they literally fed her, you know, before they. But it's you know, and I think that's what we're seeing across the board. And I think, you know, your first segment was very fascinating with the CIA, you know, operative and kind of his insights too on even what's going on in our cities. And I think, look, this is, this is something I challenge Republicans and Democrats alike to step back and look at, is we have real enemies who hate America. You know, we're here in D.C. today, and
but they're making Americans, young people hate America.
They're making
because
young
they
people
have
hate
been
America.
brainwashed.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that, you know, ultimately what they're doing is they're working us against each other. When we you know, the propaganda, they're masterful at it, and they make us feel like one another are the problems and one another are the enemies, and they're dividing Americans. And we're ignorant enough to buy it, and so then, you know, we hate one another, and we're fighting.
But you're ignorant because you choose to be. You choose not to read. You choose not to research. And look, and I know Sal can relate to this. Even for me, and I consider myself very sophisticated. And when we break a story, there's some things that go on the internet. Like I saw something where somebody created this video that had all the optics that would make you believe that Trump was having this parade today because he is deploying military all across the country to declare martial law, to finally seize America and shut down all the institutions. I mean, you look at these videos and you look at the propaganda, it looks so real, they're sophisticated. They use his voice, they use his images, Sal. It's really frightening what AI and how they're using these optics that make people believe that this is real. We're going to talk about this on the other side of the break. I'm Armstrong Williams. Happy birthday, Army. 250 years. Thank you. We'll be back.
As a home buyer, you need a lender who cares about your home ownership dreams. United Security Financial has been helping families secure their dream homes for 30 years. We're a national fair practice lender that provides affordable mortgages and low down payment programs to eligible home buyers. To learn how United Security Financial can help you secure your dream home, call 1-800-373-4186.
You know, Sal, the behavior that we see by these illegals and migrants in this country, they would never do the things in America they would do in their own country. I mean, they run around here waving the Mexican flag, the Gazan flag, all these flags that are out of America, and yet we allow this. And it seems like all the laws favor now those people that hate America. We embolden them. You got legislators protecting them. I mean, if this doesn't change, I got to tell you something. I'm very concerned for not the future, but tomorrow.
I would agree, Armstrong. I mean, I saw
and also, while we're at it, take those masks off. If you're so principled in what you believe, it is illegal for you to wear a mask. Take them off. So you show your face.
I tell you what, Armstrong, years ago when I first started, we used to automatically stop people in the street for wearing a mask because obviously we would address this by saying, you're wearing a mask, you're walking around the streets of New York City. What is this about? You know, it's 95 degrees out here. It's the middle of the summer. And the reason we would stop you, which was one of the, stop, question, and frisk issues that people had, but this was one of the things you would stop them for is, you're going to go and commit a crime wearing a mask. And then a camera, which now there are better cameras today than there were in 2008, 9, 10. But at that time, how are the cameras going to see your face that's covered? And I see that every riot that's going on has people wearing these masks. Some wearing them completely around their face. Others, they make them out of like a T-shirt. So, and they do it conveniently where all you see are eyeballs. Mm-hmm. And that's what the problem is now, trying to identify these perps that are running around, burning buildings down and doing all kinds of chaos and mishigas. That is the problem. And that in itself, Armstrong, addressing people wearing masks. Now, look, you might have a medical issue. That's one thing. But I can't see a group of people who are all wearing black or keffiyehs or whatever they're doing, putting on a mask, and we can't stop them as a police officer and say, what are you doing? Because that's how we used to handle it, and that used to quell some issues. So I agree with you, Armstrong. That's a very big thing for me. You shouldn't be wearing a mask running around. Unless you have a medical condition, the next thing I'm thinking, if I'm a police officer in the street, is saying, this group of people are going to go and commit some kind of heinous act and hope that they're not going to be recognized, because you can't see someone who's wearing a mask, right, Armstrong?
Yeah. Steve, what kind of progress do you think we've made with the tariffs and trade negotiations with China and London? I noticed the president announced that he's going to back off suspending many of these Chinese students from universities, even though, in my opinion, many of them are spies, and they sign an oath to the Chinese Communist Party to spy on America. That's why they continue to try to bring these foreign agents into this country. And obviously the market has responded favorably, but at what price? With the Chinese, which most people in their right mind would not trust.
Yeah, at a huge price. President Trump made a giant mistake, as we talked about before at the very beginning, by not gathering allies together. Forget about tariffs with Canada and aluminum and all the kind of stuff he's done, not changing his mind, grabbing allies together and moving straight toward communist China. Because his backing down again, because they control rare earth minerals the other day, means that Marco Rubio had just banned all the communist Chinese students from coming to our country. Now he's going to let them, he's made a statement this morning, he's going to let them come. This whole thing that happens with Great Britain, Australia, and America and building submarines to take on China is likely to end, which means allies, two of our greatest allies, again, Great Britain and Australia, are like, why are we being thrown under the bus? What is going on? How can we ever trust America? So he overstepped. Listen, I've been saying since 2005 we shouldn't be trading with communist China. We all knew it would take years. He should have just ratcheted up some small tariffs. He should have just kept going. He should have made some rules about where semiconductors will be bought in North America. We should have got together with our allies to say, what do we really don't have if we fight a war? Where is our fabricating plant to rebuild a giant bridge like the Golden Gate Bridge? Oh, it's in China? Well, it has to be somewhere in North America or with one of our allies. These are the things that President Trump is extraordinarily lazy about. He thinks he's at a city council meeting in New York City. He's not. When you deal with real dictators, and you're not tough at the beginning and make measured, appropriate things that you take action on, that you never back down from, they know they have you. And China has us now with these rare earth minerals, which can be made on almost anywhere. But the permitting process in America, because of what we do and how we do things, we can't build them quick enough.
Aaron, will there ever be a resolution to the Russian-Ukraine war?
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, when you see the continued death toll rise and how courageous Ukraine has been in defending themselves, and I think at the end of the day, ultimately, Putin's a bully, and I think, and look, going back to our enemies, we can't believe our enemies, and I think the fact that he showed potential interest to President Trump, that he was willing to do a ceasefire, and then at the same time turned around and did one of the largest attacks he's done in the war after that. The common denominator between Russia, between China, between Iran, they all have differences, but they also all want to be in a power position better than us. And I think, as Americans, we have to quit trusting our enemies. We have to quit assuming that everybody views the world like we view it in the West, and we've got to look at their track record, and we've got to look at what they're saying. And we look at their track record, and we look at what's being said. In Russia, I mean, it's a very, very problematic situation. But I think that there needs to be an end to the war soon, and definitely prayers for the people of Ukraine.
Sal, we've covered many protests in London, Paris, LA, New York, DC, all across the country. One of my researchers reached out to me recently, and also somebody in the intelligence community, and they often ask this question. There are so many people that came into this country under the Biden-Harris era. Many of them were Chinese, but when the Chinese came over, they did not go to the shelters, they did not take the food, they did not take the cell phones. They just disappeared into thin air, nowhere to be found, as if they were absorbed somewhere. But this is the thing about the protest. And when they mentioned it to me, I decided to check it out for myself. You know who the majority of the protesters are? Whether you're in Los Angeles, whether you're in New York, if you look at it, a lot of these are Chinese students. Mm-hmm. Chinese young men are these protesters. Why?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, they came here, look, institutionally in these colleges, what they're teaching is poisoning the youth and the foreign students as well, because they teach them this ideology that, America is the big bad wolf, and that America has done all these evil things to people, and they bring up things from the 1700s, and that everything is either race-based or ethnic-based, or, this country, we should be more lenient towards this country, and China's not a bad person, and they're not bad actors and all of this stuff. These are the things that they've been teaching, for not just recently. It's been going on for decades, Armstrong. It's a slow build-up to where you are now. So, the youth of today is not the youth that was yesterday, or us, our generation. This is the problem. You can't go back to the past and go, wow, in the 40s, the 50s, and 60s, those were what we call men, right? Those were men. Those were women. Today, you see it's a softer society. You know, you see people that they cry over. I mean, I see people having fits in the street over false narratives, false perception management campaigns. If Trump runs around and he's doing all kinds of crazy stuff, you're like, they made this guy into the boogeyman, but he's just the president of the United States. You know, I have my issues at what he does. You know, some of them mentioned today politically, you know, some political issues, but I don't sit there and go, I'm gonna hang all my problems on one man and say him and everyone around him is such a bad person, because that's not true. You know, you might disagree with him politically or whatever, but that doesn't mean he's the boogeyman. But that's what they're teaching in these colleges. Columbia University is one. You remember that, Armstrong? They were rioting over there and protesting and going after Jewish students. That's a whole nother subject. These anti-Semitic attacks that are going all over the country. Yep. It's a systematic breakdown, and it's the schools that are poisoning the young minds into thinking this is all real. This stuff has been going on for a while, but it's really built up now. Trump's also on top of that issue, Armstrong, by not sending the funds that Harvard and Columbia and all these big universities are looking for. That's a way, try to pull away some of the money to stop this, but that's another issue that needs to be addressed, what they're teaching, because that is what you just mentioned is exactly what's going on. Because now these students are out there doing what? Joining in on the rioters. And they'll be the first to be victims, by the way, because they have no mental toughness or nothing. They're just out there parroting talking points that some professor taught them. And then here comes the big bad people throwing rocks and all that, and then the rest, as you see, is being played out. It's over and over again, Armstrong.
Steve, in a minute that we have left, have our Ivy League and prestigious institutions become an outpost for Hamas and everything anti-American Israel?
Yes, they certainly have, and Trump is right to go after them. I think he should continue the pressure. They should not be, even my alma mater, Harvard, should not be, I went to the business school, but should not be an accredited institution. They should suffer a lot, and they should not have any Chinese students paying full freight, which is what they rely upon, especially people like Columbia. They shouldn't have any of this.
Well, they've been training the Chinese paramilitary right there on the campus. I mean, their own investigation discovered this. But anyhow, Steve, Sal, Aaron, Mr. Operative, WGLA 24/7, Howard Stirk Holdings. Thank you for joining us. Enjoy the weekend. I'm on my way to celebrate our United States Army of 250 years. Salute! And that was not a Hitler salute either. That was an Army salute. Army strong. We're out of here. Yeah. Yes.